Okay.
And here we are, live. Hello, and thank you for joining us today on our Oikos live broadcast. We are so excited about today, the 20th of March. We hope you got the news that we have a very special guest. This is an extremely special guest for us, and we are so excited to be sharing him with you. And that is Dr. Wile, who wrote the Science Through History series. You might be familiar with him, having written the Apologia, some of the Apologia resources, science books. So there you are. There's Dr. J. Jamie, can the people see Dr. J? Hello, Dr. J. Welcome to our Oikos live broadcast here in South Africa. We're sitting here on a hot summer's day in South Africa at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And you are sitting there in Indiana at what time? 8 o'clock in the morning?
9 o'clock in the morning.
9 o'clock in the morning. But thank you for taking this time aside to come and talk with us and be with us. We're very grateful. We're so grateful and so excited. Our set is a bit different. Our location is a bit different because in South Africa we've got something called load shedding going on. And South Africans, when you say load shedding, the general response is because it basically means we don't have power for certain times in the day, So at this stage we are on stage 4 load shedding, which means there's 4 times in the day where we don't have power for 2 hours stretches at a time. But we're not going to let that stop us. So here we are. We came into town, into Howick, which is the town near where we live. And I have borrowed the office next door to where our daughter and her husband run their offices. And we have set up the live streaming here. Did you get that photograph I sent you earlier?
Yes, I did. I saw it.
You did? So
yes, I did. It looks very serious, what's going on in front of your face.
Yeah, it's definitely serious. We've got a very serious topic today. And that's Dr. J. Wile and coming to talk to us about science. So let's jump right into that. I have got some questions that have been coming through regarding science questions from various people that either use your science resources, the books you've written, or maybe they've just got a general science question. But what I'd like to do is I'd just like to hand over to you for your hello to all the people out there.
Okay, well, hello, I'm Jay Wile. If you don't know who I am, I have a PhD in nuclear chemistry, which sounds very impressive, but it's just a trade like any other trade. You learn it and you do it. I'm a professor at Anderson University here in the United States in Anderson, Indiana, and I've written lots of homeschooling textbooks. And the reason I wrote these homeschooling textbooks was while I was a professor at Ball State University, which is another university here in Indiana, I started experiencing homeschool graduates for the first time. I didn't know anything about homeschooling. At the time, I didn't even have any children to homeschool, but my very best university students were the homeschool graduates. And that impressed me so much that I started working with homeschool graduates, or not homeschool graduates, with homeschooling parents. And pretty quickly, they asked me to write curriculum for them. So that's why I started writing curriculum, was just the products of homeschooling here in the United States really impressed me. So I'm still a big advocate of homeschooling. Now that I'm back teaching at a university again, still the homeschool graduates continue to impress me. And so I've visited your lovely country twice, actually. Both times Oikos was kind enough to bring us over and host us and so forth. And we had a wonderful time. First time we went everywhere, including Lesotho.
Well, you went pony tracking.
Yeah, I went pony tracking.
Riding on the mountains, the Lesotho mountains, yes, on the back of Lesotho ponies. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Jamie said it's the most African part of South Africa. And then we came back, 10 years later in 2014.
Yes.
And did some recording and just enjoyed the wonderful atmosphere there.
Well, that is 5 years ago now, so I think it's time for another visit.
For another visit, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Jay, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It is very, very much a blessing to be able to have you as part of this entire process here of home educating in South Africa. But of course, we know live streaming means the world, so anybody out there in the world is able to join us on this live streaming. I just think it's totally incredible. In fact, you might see on the live streaming there at the moment on the chat. Can you see the chat? Are you?
Yes, I can.
Are you following the chat? We see Bruce Archibald, somebody by the name of Bruce Archibald. That happens to be our manager there at Oikos Base, running the publishing house. So that's exciting that he has joined us, because I'm here in Howick and he's out there in the Karkloof. So Bruce, if you've got any questions for Dr. J, you can fire away there. And anybody else who might have any questions for Dr. J, please would you not be shy. We need you to ask Dr. J, because this is a very special time that we have with him, and we would like to utilize every moment we have to pick your brain, because I mean, you know, you've got your brain seems to be very well ready, prepared.
It's full anyway.
It's full anyway. Yeah. So I'm going to fire away, because I don't have a lot of questions coming through here on the live chat. So I'm going to fire away in the meantime and ask you some questions, if you don't mind, with what I've got here. This person has asked, what if I start the Science Through History series later? Can I jump in the middle? Would you mind, Jay, just telling people the series, how it goes? It starts with science in the beginning, and then just the titles and the sequential order. And are they sequential? Is it okay if people jump around, or is it going to not work so well?
So there are 5 titles. It starts with Science in the Beginning, which orders the science they're learning by the days of creation. So each day God created some things, and so you learn the science of those things in that order. Once you're done with Science in the Beginning, then we start learning science in the order it was discovered. And so we start with the ancient world, and that's the next title is Science in the Ancient World, and that starts the historical look at how science developed. Then we do Science in the Scientific Revolution, then Science in the Age of Reason, and then Science in the Industrial Age. And so those 5 books are kind of are a good K through 6 experience for science. Every book can be used by multiple ages, because there are different review questions at the end that you can make for older students to get more out of it. So all of your K through 6 students could be doing the same book and the same lesson and so forth. So whether or not you can jump in the middle, I personally think the only place I would jump in would be with the first historical book. If you've done some science already, you could probably skip Science in the Beginning, because it's pretty basic. Once you start the historical approach, you're learning a story. And the story is
timeline,
how we learned. Yeah, how we learned what we know today. So you could skip the first book without interrupting the story at all. But then once you start with Science in the Ancient World, I would just keep going. And if you don't have time to finish, if you've got, say, a 4th grader, and they're going to do 2 or 3 years before they go on to a higher level of education, then I would just go as far as you can and get as much of the story as you can. Because I think that works better. One of the things you learn in science, especially if you look at science this way, is how science is continually a process where somebody comes up with an idea that's mostly wrong, and then over time, that idea is refined to become more and more correct. And I think if you look at the beginning of how we started learning things, and you see each time an idea was corrected, I think that is very, very valuable for understanding how science works. A lot of students have this idea that if it's in my science book, it's true. And that's just not the case, because science is continually fixing the mistakes it's made in previous years. And so any science textbook you read that has any kind of depth at all to it, there's going to be some things that are probably wrong in it, because science has learned more and corrected some of its mistakes.
Right, thank you. That is very, very helpful. I'm sure that fully covers the question that person had, as well as I'm sure many other would have the same question come down the road, as we go down the road. And then here is another question, which I think you might have covered in your answer to the previous question, but the question is, what if I miss something? Now, that is a very broad question. What if I miss something?
I know what they're saying, though.
You do? Okay, thank you. If you can answer that.
We have this idea, a lot of folks have this idea, probably because of the way schooling operates, that there are certain things you have to learn before you can go to the next step. And so the person, I think, is concerned. Let's suppose I do just a couple of the books and then have to go on to the next level of, we would call it middle school. I can't remember what it's called there. But roughly
junior. Oh no, you won't go with what I say, because I'm doing before the current. So whatever.
Yeah.
We age. So anyway, let's go with age. Let's go with the age of the person, of the child.
Okay. Yeah. So when the student reaches somewhere between 12 and 14, they need to start having something more detailed. And so typically you go out of an elementary science education, you go into something that's a pre-high school. Yeah, junior high. Something like that. So if in elementary school, let's suppose I only get through a couple of books, and maybe I've never learned anything about electricity. So what happens when I go to high school? Will the student be confused or be at a disadvantage because they missed everything about electricity? They don't know anything about electricity. My answer is no. They're not going to be hurt by that, because anytime, especially if you're using my materials, and this is really generally true, when we start a new level, when we go from elementary to junior high, let's say, we do a review to make sure everybody's at the same place. And so electricity will be covered the basics of electricity will be covered again, and then you'll learn more detail. So in the words of educators, we say that the elementary years are not content specific. And what that means is you don't have to learn specific content in the sciences. Now, in maths, that's something different. But for sciences, the K through 6 years are not content specific. Really, you could spend all 6 years studying bugs if that's what you wanted to do, and that will be okay, because then when you get into junior high, you've got the process of science down. So now you can pick up the stuff you missed before.
Fantastic. Okay, so you fully understood that question. Thank you for answering that for us. Next one was, what age must they move on from science and history? That's a good one. And I think you've explained quite nicely, Jay, that your resources, the Science Through History series, is very specifically following a timeline, hence you expounding upon the fact that you can skip science in the beginning if you are jumping in at an older level, when the individual is a little bit older. But it's quite nice to follow the timeline of history from there onward. But now the question is, what age must they move on from science and history? I would imagine that question is meaning, what age do you, as the author, feel they need to have completed those science books, your Science Through History series?
So one of the real great benefits of home education is you get to tailor the students' learning to the students' abilities and the students' needs. Exactly. So it's very hard for me to say at exactly what age they should transition from my elementary to my junior high, because it really does depend on the student. If I've got a student who is very much into writing or history or something like that and isn't going to pursue the sciences a lot, then I think what we're requiring to them to get through by the time they're done with high school is different from a student who wants to study the sciences. So if I've got a student who's not science oriented, I could imagine sticking with the K through 6 series probably until, at least 14, maybe even 15, because in the end, when they, you think they're going to have, maybe 14. You think they're going to have 4 more years of schooling after 14. Yes. Then they could do the general science, the physical science, the biology, and the chemistry, and that would be plenty for a student. Yeah, that would be plenty for a student who's not interested in science. Who, if the student goes to university, most likely they'll just take the real basic required science courses, which are very low level. And so, if they get through chemistry by the time they're done with high school, that's enough. Now, obviously, if a student is science oriented, you want to transition them sooner. And I would think, basically the best way to do it is with the maths level. And notice I'm trying to put the S in there.
Well done. You see, let me just tell the South Africans why Jay does it, because in America they say math. They don't say maths like we do here in South Africa. So, but what's interesting, Jay, is we do have international guests on our live streaming. So I just want to thank you, international guests, those of you who are out there that have joined us. Thank you for joining us. And bring your questions on. Jay's there to answer your questions. And I see there's a question waiting there for you, Jay, that I'll read to you in a moment. But yes, thank you for putting the emphasis on the maths. By the way, that is where you're going with that is very, very important. Yeah, people need to know how the maths and science, what levels they need to match each other at. So, thank you for spending time on that.
Especially a student who's science oriented, who's at least very interested in science and may pursue it later on in his or her life. Then I think you should aim to be taking high school biology and Algebra 1 at the same time.
Okay.
And so if you think about a student who's interested in science, they would transition out of the science and history 2 years before they take algebra. That way they'll have a 7th grade year, which is 2 years before algebra, then an 8th grade year, 1 year before algebra, and then in their 9th grade year, they would be in algebra and taking biology.
Well, this is a great comfort to me because I'm not the scientist and I'm not the mathematician either. But when people ask me when does their child need to start general science, transition out of your science through history, I basically say to them what you've said. So I'm just feel tremendously supported now because we encourage parents to not rush the process and to consider the bigger picture and to enjoy the actual process, the content, and absorb it. And I want to just now use this opportunity to let you know of a little testimony I heard just a few days ago, actually, of a young man who's 13 years old that was talking to his friend who's also 13 years old. And they were talking about, the friend was saying why he can't believe in God, because you can't believe in something you can't see. And the other child said, young man, so he's not a child anymore, he's 13 now, so he's a young man. He said to his friend, but can you see the air? And the friend said, well, no, not really. So he said, well, that's the same with God. You might not be able to see him, but the air helps you to breathe, which helps you to live, that is why I believe in God. And I won't go into the whole story, but I'm telling you this little testimony because it came from your books. This young man had been doing lessons with Science Through History series, and that he was able to communicate with somebody that was an unbeliever and saying, I don't believe in God and I can't believe in God and I don't see how you can believe in God. And so to me that is the treasure to me. That is what it's about, actually. Anyway, from the Oikos heart of things, is that is why we are encouraging parents to spend time with their children, their students in these resources, so that they can gain that from it. I mean, what is your response to that?
Well, yeah, it's wonderful to hear the testimony. That's a really wonderful thing to hear. It always warms my heart when a student remembers anything from my books, but much less something that important. That's very good.
Exactly, that's what it's meant to do.
Yeah, one thing that Science Through History does, we are not shy about talking about the Christian faith of these men and women who brought us the science we have today. And so throughout the book, we talk specifically about, in some cases, how their Christianity helped them to do the science. So, for example, we're using computers. The reason we can use computers is because of a fellow named Leibniz. And Leibniz developed a binary mathematical system. First a binary logic and then a binary mathematical system, which is what our computers are based on. They're based on binary math. Well, he said the reason he developed binary math was to communicate creation to the unbeliever. He actually called them
wonderful. And look what we're doing right now. I mean, we're using technology, maths, computers. Thank you, to the scientists and the like, to make it even possible for us to be able to do what we're doing. I'm just blown away. I think it's incredible that I can sit here in our country in South Africa, and you can sit there in the States, and together, actual live, real time, we can talk to each other and talk to others that have joined. And that is, as you say, that is maths and science. So
the maths that we are using right now in our computers, that's because this fellow wanted to communicate creation, the idea that there was nothing and then there was everything, to people who didn't believe.
Fantastic. So, yeah. Jay, let me go to back. I nearly grabbed my glasses off my head and they weren't there. All right, so here we have Annalie. Thank you, Annalie, for joining us, our faithful Oikos live guest. Our faithful, loyal guest. Thank you again for being there. She says, I'm doing general and physical science with my 11, 13, and 15-year-olds. As we go on into chemistry and physics after biology, will I need outside help to teach it? That is a good question. Do people using Oikos, do people using the science books need outside help? Like me, mom, who isn't the scientist and isn't the maths teacher, do I need help outside the science books? I mean, outside tutoring to help me with the science? Well, my answer to that before Jay answers, as a mother, is I can say, I had the same thought, like, I wonder how I'm going to do this because I don't feel confident that I know how to teach my children science when I myself didn't achieve in that area in my life or develop that skill or whatever. But the point was, thank you, Jay, that Jay actually spoke to me, as the parent. I've got the solutions and test book, and he's speaking to the student as though he himself is there speaking to the student. That is the thing that I really gained from your books, Jay, is the fact that they were such a tremendous support that once we got into them, I never again had the thought that Annalie's having now, what when they get to higher levels, what do I do? Do I need a tutor? That is my experience. But what is your answer to that question?
So certainly I wrote the books, and one reason my books are successful in multiple countries that homeschool. They've been translated into Korean and Chinese, by the way.
Wow, so, Chinese.
Yeah.
Your book's on Chinese now.
It's illegal for them to be homeschooling or privately schooling, but many do. And so they're risking, their own freedom and so forth in order to be able to teach their students properly. So I had the wonderful privilege of going over to China and working with some of these amazing people.
When was that?
That was 2 years ago.
Wow, that is wonderful. Yeah. That is so exciting.
So anyway, because these are around the world, obviously they've met that need. They've met the need of not being able, not needing an outside tutor and so forth. Now, some students will have problems, so I want to type something in the box here. It should come out as a Berean Builders thing.
Okay.
But if you have, and this address is in my the introduction to all of my Science Through History books. It's in the introduction to my chemistry book. So if you have one of those, did you get it? It doesn't seem
I haven't
to be,
got it yet, Jay. It doesn't show on my side. Jamie, do you have it?
Okay, I think I know why.
Something. Okay.
I think I see why. Let's try that there. Now, so let me just type. It doesn't want me to put a link in there for whatever reason. But that's the address. It's AskDrWile.com. So if you go to www.askdrwile.com, you can ask me questions.
Put that in our link. Jamie will put that there for you, Jay. Jamie will put in that
Okay.
address. Just give it to us again. Ask Dr. Wile.
Yeah,
Okay, let's get
it's
us
up
right.
there.
Let's get it right.
AskDrWile.com. So
Oh,
yeah,
so
but
.com.
yeah, you got to put. I can't put the .com in there for some reason. So
Okay.
anyway, if a student, and the students are the ones who mostly use this, but parents are free to as well. The student gets stuck and really doesn't know what to do. Go to that website. There is an archive of questions that have already been asked, but you can just
Wonderful.
ask me. But you can also just ask me the question. And
Wonderful.
so that way, if you do get stuck, either as a parent or as a student, then I can help you out. Because I really do want you to be able to do this well. On the for the chemistry book, we have a free website you can go to that has all sorts of videos that help to explain what the chemistry book's
Nice.
covering and all of that, and that's
But
all
just
in the
wait.
introduction.
Sorry, it's all.
Yeah,
But sorry, that is that discovering chemistry by design.
yeah, yeah. Discovering design with chemistry. Yeah,
Oh, that way
uh,
around. Sorry.
yeah,
Oops.
yeah. That's okay.
Okay.
So yeah, that in
Um,
the introduction to that book, and the very first thing the students asked to do is go back and read the introduction. Chapter 1, the very first thing they say is
well
go back and
done.
read the introduction, because the
Well
introduction
done.
has those two websites, one with the videos
Yes.
and then one to ask me questions. And so
Well, I tell you what we'll do. I
hopefully
hope.
you aren't going to need to do that, but you can.
Well, yeah, well, you can, and it's good to know that that's there and that service is there. I'm going to ask Bruce Archibald, who's we hope is still there, to actually make a note of us to put that onto our website. So when people
Yes.
purchase that particular science book, your chemistry book, then we'll remind them as well to please
Yeah.
be aware of the service of Ask Dr. And Dr. Weil. I'm also
And you could
glad
do
you
that.
have pronounced
Yeah. Yeah, you
your
can do that
name.
for any of the books, even the Apologia books. You can put that for any of
Okay.
the books. They can use that link.
Okay, great. And I'm glad you said Apologia, and I'm glad you said Dr. Weil, because we get a lot of versions of that here. So I'm
Yes.
glad that it comes from the author's mouth himself how to pronounce what you created. Do you get versions of that there in your land?
Oh yes, and I get people arguing with me. They will call me They will call me Dr. Wiley, and I will say no, it's Wile, and they said no, it's Wiley.
That's so funny. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see if
I
there's
tell
any
them,
other
well, I'm
questions.
just saying what my mother told me.
Okay, here's another one. Will science through history prepare my children for high school? I would say you've already answered that question. You answered that question earlier, that it is preparing them to move on to general science. You're also encouraging people not to be in a hurry, to wait
Yep.
until about age 14, because then they've still got those 4 years. My experience this side, I don't know if it is the same on your side, but here I'm experiencing people trying to get their children onto general science younger and younger and younger, and
Yep.
that concerns me, because I think, what is the rush? Can you
Yeah, and
sort of
I think
speak more on
you
that,
know,
even though you've said, yeah.
yeah, certainly science through history is not going to be directly preparation for high school. You are going to have to go through, at least one of those two books, general or physical science, preferably both of them. So I think the science through history prepare you for general and physical science, which then prepare you for high school. But I think it's very important. I think parents need to realize childhood is a serious business. And you can't overlook the serious need that children have to play and discover
Exactly.
for themselves and so forth. And so this idea that we have to rush them into these high-level academic subjects early is very, very bad. In the end, part of the reason children are sort of natural scientists and part of the reason scientists are so interested in what they do is because as they were young, they started just being curious and looking under rocks and digging holes and things like that. And that kind of stuff cannot be replaced by a book. You can go get a book on what you find under a rock, but it's not the same as turning over rocks yourself and seeing these things. So I think, we tend to, I don't know why, probably because everybody thinks they have to go to university and so forth. We have this idea that we have to start teaching them higher and higher level things younger and younger. And I'm very much against that.
Yeah, well,
because,
me too.
yeah, a student has to get to the point of exploring the world around him or her on his or her own before you start learning the detailed academics and everything. And that's one reason my
Jane, I
science through
think.
history book has so many experiments in it, because I want them,
Fantastic.
exploring on their own.
Yes, and I just want to mention something that you said a little earlier about younger, middle, older. In your science through history books,
Yeah.
you have younger, middle, older activities, so that it can be used for all the children of the various ages.
Yes.
That one science book. I love that, and I love also the fact that it has a lot of parental involvement, because basically it's a parent book. Would you agree that your science
Oh
through
yeah.
history books are actually parent books? Would you agree?
Yeah, they really are. A lot of
Okay.
parents tell me that, some parents like read aloud to their children from the books, but a lot of parents tell me they read the book ahead of time. They use the book to do the experiment, and they do the experiment with the children, but then they just tell the children what they learned from the reading. So
Oh,
they're much
wow.
more, teaching the children what they just learned maybe last night, about what
Okay.
this experiment means and so forth.
Fantastic.
So some parents do the read aloud thing, and that's great. But a lot of parents just say, "Well, I'm going to learn the science, and I'm going to teach it to my kids."
And what about the parents that give the book to their child and the child gets on with it on their own? Have you heard of that version?
Well, yes, I have, and I think you should never, at that age especially, you should never be doing that completely. I think it's always nice to try and get the student to do the reading, by maybe aloud with you, so that we're starting to shift the learning responsibility a little bit. So I think that's useful. But in these early years, I think you need to be actively plugged in, even if your
Yes.
child's almost ready to go to junior high and is reading on his or her own and understanding the experiments. One thing you can do, if you really feel like, you don't have time, or you really want your child learning on his or her own, have your child do that, but then have your child teach you and tell you what they learned.
That's the best.
You know,
First prize.
that way
Yeah.
that way you're still actively involved. And there's a kind of a teaching technique over here called Charlotte Mason, and that's one of the principal tools that the Charlotte Mason method uses. It's called narration. The child learns something and then tells somebody.
Okay. Wow. That is why this works so well. Oikos and Dr. J. Wile, because it's exactly the same vision and heart towards childhood. So I'm really, really glad to hear you sharing your heart on that as well. They were just going to see there was another question that came up here, but before I actually read this, okay, I think you've also answered that already. But I just want to clear something, and that is there might be a little bit of confusion, and that is you referenced, Jay, to going to junior high, the general science and the physical science books at age 14 or so, correct?
Yeah, especially for students who aren't really all that interested in science. Yes.
Okay, because in this country, I can tell you that when we talk prepare them for high school, people immediately think high school is at age 13, because once they finish elementary, they're in the region of age-wise 12
Okay.
or 13. And so they straight away feel that at age 13, wherever they're at with the Science Through History series, they need to stop there and jump into doing the general science and the physical science, so that they can, work through the high school, as it were, resources, science resources. So can you just explain that a little bit? Because your reference is 14 and 15, not 13 and
Yeah.
14. Is that right?
Yeah. So every country is different. In the United States,
Yes.
most universities want to see 3 high school sciences, and
Oh,
physical science counts, though. In the United States, physical science would be considered a high school level course. So I
oh,
tell students here in
right.
the U.S. that the minimum you need to do, the absolute minimum, is physical science, biology, and chemistry. If you
Okay.
aren't interested in science, if you aren't going to go into science, then physical science, biology, and chemistry is good enough. That's 3 years. So you think about that's when you're technically starting high school. Now, students who are science oriented are going to do that much sooner. So, think about for the student who's not science oriented, only going to get through physical science, biology, and chemistry, then they would start general science 5 years before they graduate, which is generally around 14, right? So that's what I'm thinking. And now, of course, students who are interested in science and learning science real well, they're going to start a lot sooner, and that's fine too. That's the beauty of homeschooling. You're, adapting to your child's specific needs. But I do think, for the student who really struggles with science, doesn't like science, and doesn't plan to go into it, I think your main goal is just to get through the chemistry before you leave. Now, I do want to answer Annalise's question question because I think it's important. She's asking, how important is it to complete all the study guides, summaries, tests, and quarterly tests? I'm saying the only thing you really have to complete are the study guides and the tests. That's all you have to complete. The summaries are for students who need more study. So if you're doing poorly on the tests, then you could use the summary as another way of studying. But that's why those summaries are in the appendix, because they're not necessary. You do them if you feel like you need more study. Also, I've never been a fan of cumulative tests. So the quarterly tests, like I never gave my daughter any cumulative testing in high school at all. Even my university courses, what I test them cumulative on is less than the total material. So there are some cumulative ideas, but they're the really important ones. So I don't use the quarterly tests at all. They're in the book because people asked for them. Some people felt they were necessary, so I put them in. But I think in the introduction to the parent book, I actually say only do these if you think they're necessary, because I don't. So I would say study guides and tests are the important things to complete.
Okay. Jay, I would like to just answer Annalie on this one from a mom's perspective again, and that is,
please do.
Annalie, what I did with the tests, because I hear what you're saying here, the last part of your question was, we find ourselves in a lot of discussions and tests can stress some of my kids out. So the thing is what we found is that some children really like a test, like they've received the material, they've maybe had discussion time, we hope, like Jay was talking about the narration. Part of it, we feel a lot of learning is happening there. When it comes to the test, we actually adapted the test according to the individual. And people get concerned, but they've got to be able to write tests for when the children are in high school, or they've got to be able to know how to write tests, and they've got to be prepared to write tests and all of that. But for me, that came much later when the child was moving into young adult and then adult life. That's when maybe if they're heading towards something that requires test-taking skills, then we would address that. We didn't even think about addressing that when they were 10, 11, 12, 13. And what we did instead is as a mom, I took that test from the science book actually, and then I would ask the questions as though it was a written test. And we would use the test in a discussion, more of a discussion kind of a way. And then I would find out from that the child didn't really understand that module of the science section. They really hadn't grasped what the lessons were. I would pick that up as the mom, and then we would go back together into that module, that section of it, and we would spend some more time on it. But I never spent time on it in such a way that the child felt that they had failed or that they hadn't done well. We would just dive back in and have fun and actually focus more on the experiments and the actual whole experience of it, not just the facts. And I just want to talk about that a little bit, Jay, and that is, people do get caught up on the facts. And if the test says, it's a factual question, you would be able to give an example of one, I'm sure, because you've got it in your brain, I don't have. But it would be a question that was going to require an answer that was fact-based. Let's use a history fact. And what year was this scientist, when did they discover, when was the atom discovered? I'm just going to try and grab something here. And now they've got to give the answer. To me, as a parent, it wasn't so much about the year. I wasn't concerned whether my child was going to remember the year that happened, but what concerned me more was the actual individual who discovered that, and how the discovery was made, and what that discovery means to us today, and how it is affecting our lives today. Like we were talking, we can do live streaming today because of maths and science, you know. So that is what I would pull from the test, not so much the factual academic answers, if I can call them that. I mean, that's just what I wanted to share with Annalie. Yeah.
Well, and I agree that, once again, with homeschooling, you're trying to meet your child's individual needs. Some children
Correct.
need a lot of coaxing into being able to take tests. And this coaxing would be making them more comfortable, like you said, by doing it orally first without any thought that they're being graded. Yes. Just to see it, because the purpose of the test is to see if you learn the material. Whether you can write it down or not is not the primary goal. So it may take a long time for a student to actually get to the point where they can take tests. And I think the goal with homeschooling is you want to continue to challenge your student, but you do not want to overwhelm your student. That's what I always call the sweet spot of education. If you can find that place where you're challenging but not overwhelming your student, that's where you want to be. And for some students, that's taking tests very early in life. For many students, it's taking tests much, much, much later.
Exactly. So there you have it. You can have a household of 4 children, and every one of them, it's going to be a different scenario when it comes to test taking. But in a school system, a school scenario, the test is given on a Friday, and we're doing spelling test on Friday, and that's it. And you're either going to do really well, and some children are always going to do very well, and others are going to always do very badly. And then because one child is responding really well to tests, and that's how they learn. They get the information, and they can give back the information, whereas another child is not going to be able to deliver the information as well in a test environment, and so then it's considered that child has failed. And that is exactly one of the wonderful blessings of home education, is the children don't have to feel as though they failed just because they don't manage in a certain to deliver in a certain kind of environment as well as another. So okay, great. We agree, don't we, Jay? It's so nice that we are of the same view here. Okay. Any more questions from your side? What I'm seeing here. Oh, okay. The questions that are coming in on my side are showing that you have very, very much answered them already. Yep. Because the next one was, what high school book do I go on to from the science through history? And of course, that has already been answered. So what I'd like to go is, I'd like to go a little bit behind the scenes here, Jay, and just ask some questions from a more from the heart of it point of view. And that is, if you can just tell us what caused you to write these resources, which we absolutely love, and we found are tremendous tool in the hands of parents to lead and guide their children towards creation, and who is our creation, and the divine of it all. I mean, can you give us some background on that? I'm sure that's going to be helpful for people.
Yeah, so, initially, like I said, my best university students were homeschool graduates, and so I started wanting to learn more about this homeschooling thing. So I started working with the Indiana a group of homeschoolers. They call themselves the Indiana Association of Home Educators. And so I started giving talks at their convention and at little gatherings, trying to tell parents, look, you're doing a good job, because my best university students are homeschool graduates. And also, here are the things you want to consider for preparing your child for university, for doing a university application, those kinds of things. Well, pretty quickly, when they find out that I'm a science professor, they really, I was told, and this was back in the early 90s, I was told there really isn't anything out there for science for homeschoolers. We're having to adapt what's out there for schools, and is there anything that you could do about that? And initially, I wasn't very interested in doing that. I was a professor, and I had plenty of other things to do. But some fairly persuasive homeschoolers, homeschooling parents, convinced me what they wanted me to do was to write or to do a little class that would meet once a week, and the kids would come to my house or somebody else's house, and I'd teach them chemistry, and then they'd go off and do problems and things like that on their own. And I told the parents up front, that's not what homeschooling's about. Homeschooling's not about
Yay.
taking them out of school and putting them into a different kind of school. Homeschooling's about learning at home. So I told them the compromise I would do is I would write them a chemistry course, and I would send it out chapter by chapter as I got it done.
Wow.
And so that was the first thing I did. I started writing, and really when I sat down to type at the keyboard, all I did was I thought, what would I say to my class? And then I just started typing what I'd say to my class.
And that is why it's so personal. That's why it feels like
personal.
that, like you're talking to the student. Yeah.
And, you know, I hadn't even gotten halfway through the book when I started getting calls from other people saying, I have a friend who's using your chemistry book. And I remember the very first time I got this phone call, I said, I haven't written a chemistry book because I didn't think of what I was doing as writing a chemistry book.
Yeah.
And so because there were lots of other people who obviously wanted to use it, I started putting it together myself, publishing it myself, and so forth. And I said, you know, all I know is chemistry and physics. That's what I teach at university. So I said I will write chemistry and physics, and I will be done. That's it, no more, because I still want to be a professor.
Famous last words, hey?
Yeah. Well, once again, these homeschoolers were rather persuasive. So I said if they could find me a biologist, I would write the biology book with him or her. And so they did find me a biologist, and I together we wrote the biology book. By this time, you know, I was now interacting with a lot of kids who had used my books and things like that, and I found I was having a lot more fun doing that than teaching at university. So that's when I decided, okay, maybe I should stop teaching at university and start doing this. And so that was back the last time I taught at university, I think was 96 or 97.
Wow, but now you're teaching again there, aren't you?
Yeah, now I'm teaching. Boy, teaching has changed in those 20 years, I'll tell you that.
I can imagine, yeah.
The technology is really, really different. But the students are different too. There's a completely different attitude, completely different way of approaching things. So yeah, it was kind of a shock when I first came back. Now I'm a little used to it. But so yeah, I did. Mostly it was just and my main goal was a lot of parents were telling me here in the U.S. that they were sending their kids off to high school because they couldn't do science. And I said, that's not a reason. That's not a good reason. Yeah. And so my hope was just that once I decided to do it full time, that my curriculum would just keep people in homeschool longer. That was the goal.
That was the goal, but now it's achieved a lot more than that, because for me, from this side of the table, and from Oikos' side, and from the people that we hope to be helping and serving and supporting in their journey, the thing that stands out for me on a personal level and our own family as well is the creation aspect of your science. That is the thing that really stands out for us.
Well, yeah, and you know, I got several years ago now, it's been quite a while ago, I got an email from someone who said, why do you feel the need to keep talking about God in these books? Why can't you just teach the science without talking about God? And, you know, I really wanted to think about that. I do science, you know, as a way of learning more about God's creation, so it's natural for me, but I wondered why. Why is it like that for me? And I said, I wrote back to him and I said, imagine trying to teach a course on U.S. law and never mentioning the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution is the legal document that forms the United States. It's what our Supreme Court uses to interpret any law that's made. And so imagine, I think you could probably teach U.S. law without referencing the Constitution, because you could just give case histories and casework and things like that. But if you don't teach the source, they don't understand what came from it well. So you could probably teach the law that way, but without understanding the source of the law, I don't think they'd understand the law very well. And I think science is the same way. I could probably teach science without referencing God, but without going back to the source, I think you end up not learning it as well. Fantastic. So I think it's the best way to teach science, the best way to learn science is in the context of, look, everything you're studying was designed by this incredible engineer that's so much better than anybody, you know, any scientist will ever be. And if we understand that's what we're studying, that immediately makes us think differently about what's the science we're doing.
And I'd like to just take it a little further than that, because again, from a mother's experience of your science books, is this is a fruit that I have seen that is something that stands out so dramatically for me, that this is probably the main reason that I would encourage people to use science and not use science as one of the resources for teaching their children. And that is because what I discovered in our household is I can share God with our children, and I can share His Word with them, and I can tell them about their Savior, and I can do all of that from a biblical, spiritual training, teaching platform. Now it comes to them having their own science book, and now they're on this journey on their own, as they get into the young adult years. So now they're on this journey whereby they are taking out their science book and they're sitting reading it, or they're listening to the audio book if they've got difficulty with reading. So there's that wonderful service as well. But what the fruit that I see is this. I'm just going to give you one small example, is when your child or your young adult comes to you and starts their sentence with, "Mom, you know how amazing God is." and it's coming from them because they discovered something through the study they're doing in their science book. They discovered something of God on their own. That to me is just, there it is, beginning and end.
Absolutely.
And so now this young person is actually on a journey. And that's why I shared that testimony of the young man who's talking to his friend about why he believes in God and how he can believe in God. And then he references to your book and what he learned out of the science book that he is studying at that time. So to me, that is the greatest value of these books, to be honest. I just found that as a parent, to be able to give the children in our household a resource that actually can take them on a journey that is on their own journey, not necessarily directed by the parent anymore. Now they're discovering God for themselves. And I don't think that happens as effectively through other resources. Obviously the Word of God, when they're studying the Word of God, I found that when they were doing Konos How, actually, I would walk into one of their places of study, whether it was the dining room table or the bedroom or whatever, and there they would be sitting there with 3 versions of Bibles on the desk, and they would be doing this word study. I mean, that is just thrilling, to know that your children are diving into the Word. But the fact that the science books help them on a journey to discover their Creator and the amazing greatness of God on their own, without mom and dad telling them about this wonderful great God who created them, but they discovered that for themselves through those science books. I just think that I don't know another resource that does that as effectively, is what I'm saying, than doing it through science, because of the greatness of God, because of being absolutely impressed and amazed by Him. So I love it that you have so much of, you reference so much to God as you through your writing. I just think it wouldn't be the same if you'd left Him out. You can't leave Him out. He's the greatest scientist after all. How can He be left out? So, yeah.
Well, and it's a great testimony. The Bible tells us that the heavens declare the glory of God. Also, in Romans, Paul talks about how even people who have never heard about God will know that He exists because His divine attributes are clearly seen through what's been made. And so science is a great showcase for talking about God,
exactly.
Because in the end, it's his divine attributes are right there to be seen.
Yes, the divine. Okay, Jay, I'm going to. It might be that Annalie's got another comment here. Thank you, Annalie, for engaging with us. She says, "I have a daughter who can tell me what spontaneous generation is, but if you put a test in front of her and tell her to answer it in a definition form, she thinks she can't." Oh, so that's now a different skill. So that's not about science. That's actually about teaching her daughter communication.
But let me tell her that here's what you do with a situation like that. When you're to the point, I don't know how old she is, but when you're at the point where you're wanting to get her to start doing tests, the first thing you do is you don't put the test in front of her. You do what Sonia did. You ask the questions from the test orally. Then after a few of those and the student's comfortable with that, then you write the student's responses down. So the student's still telling you, and all you do is write out what they're saying. And at the end, you then show them, there's your test, you know,
Yeah.
and do that a few times. And one other thing I've told parents a lot is if the student's struggling with remembering everything and all of that, when we get to the point where they're taking tests, most of the by the end of high school, they want to be taking the test without any help, right? But for the first few years, especially, you can say, okay, for the first 45 minutes of this test, you can't use anything. But then for the last 15 minutes, I'll let you use the book. Right? Now, they can't answer the whole test with 15 minutes, so they're going to answer what they can, and then they'll start using their book. And then over time, you start reducing the amount of time they can use their book. But anyway, what you want to do is whatever problem they're having with taking tests, you want to introduce things gradually to them.
Yes.
And so with that particular thing, she can already say, all we have to do is get her to the point where she's comfortable writing what she would have said. So we've got to figure out a way to go from saying it to writing it. And that may take 2-3 years. Who knows?
Yes. And I'd like to add a bit more to that. Yeah, Annalie, I'd like to add a little bit more to that and let you know, again, our test me. We did exactly what Jay is suggesting here, and that is you are basically scribing what your child is saying. So I did that on the keyboard, and I'd ask a question, and as they're answering, I'd be writing their answers and then be able to give it to them and say, look, there's your answers. I did it that way. Then I did another thing, is I actually recorded their answers, and I showed them how much they had to give. So without even realizing, I mean, we've got these wonderful gadgets now called phones, smartphones. You just hit the record and you record your child's delivery or what they're sharing about, and because they've got so much to say and so much to share. Even if you've got a child that's quieter and you ask them a question and they're giving you little bits and pieces, you can record that and let them know how much they have stored inside, that they maybe just need some help with knowing how to share that. But I think what happens is you're seeing the result of their huge struggle when you're adding all the other elements. They've got to think, they've got to write, they've got to get their sentence structure right. They've got adding all these extra elements to trying to present something, and so the mind goes blank. I think that happens to adults. I mean, if an adult is under pressure, they go and they have to apply multiple skills at the same time to be able to deliver something. If you're going to do a presentation or something, and now the technology is not working, and the PowerPoint didn't work, and the projector globe went, and it just suddenly you can't deliver the way what you've got inside to be able to deliver. And so what I've done with our children, again, I'm just sharing personal testimony, is I've found a lot of different ways to help them to see how they can actually bring forth and deliver what they have within them. And it doesn't have to be by sitting them down and doing a test to see what they're capable of for themselves. I mean, who's that test for anyway, if you think about it? The test isn't necessary. Yeah.
Let me tell you a story that you might recognize. I once spent several days, a couple of weeks, with a very, very wise homeschooling mother who had two children, a boy and a girl. And both of them were just wonderful to be around and so forth. But I was particularly impressed with the girl because she spoke the Queen's English. She could talk about wide range of things, from science to literature to history. Very articulate young lady. So later on, she sends me a letter. And the letter is written as if she might be 4 or 5 years old. Words or letters are backwards. The syntax is very poor. I honestly think that she's trying to make a joke. And I almost start writing her back a letter that is making fun of her letter. But then the Holy Spirit checks me. So I ask the mother, I email the mother and tell the mother. And the mother says, oh, no, this is the way she writes. She has this learning challenge and so forth. I never imagined that, having spent more than 2 weeks with this young lady talking on a wide variety of issues, that she had any kind of learning disability. The reason she was so articulate and so learned in person was because this wise homeschooling mother had adapted her education so that she could deal with these challenges. And I think that's what every homeschooling parent has to do, whether it's a certified learning disability or just I get nervous taking tests. You've got to adjust the learning to fit the child's needs.
Exactly. So yes, we know who you were talking about, Jay.
I figured that.
Well, exactly. That is just, I mean, all you're doing is touching on one of the very, very, very many blessings and values and treasures of being able to home educate. And Annalie, I know, has 4 children, and she has been a dedicated, committed mom, and she is finding out and talking about which is the best way to go about doing the best for her children. And that's what it's all about. And I love the fact that, Annalie, that you said, my faith is strengthened and I see my children excited. Oh my goodness. I mean, you know, isn't that enough right there, Jay, for us?
That is.
I think
Absolutely.
that's actually a point of where we should close on such a high note. And that is, we have been going, I think it's an hour. Yes, we've an hour on the dot. So I want to just thank Jay for your time. Thank you for helping us to grow in our faith with your commitment and dedication to the science books you're writing. Do not stop. You know, I'm going to just keep reminding you to just press on and keep going. You can remind me to press on and keep going for this kingdom work, and I'll do the same for you. And I'm just so grateful that you could be there. I'm so grateful for technology that this could actually happen, even though we had challenges that were like Mount Everest today. I suppose not really, but it felt like it. And but yet we managed to push through, and we've been able to have this hour with you. We value your time, we value your input, and especially the very, very many hours you have spent in writing these books, which now are in Chinese. I want some of those Chinese books. I want one.
It's so funny to have a book that I've written that I can't read.
It's amazing. I just want to see it. You know, do they look the same? They just show me one.
I think I might have one. Let me look real quick.
Oh, great. Jay's going off to get his science book that's been translated into Chinese.
So this is the Korean book. So this is the Korean.
The Korean one. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have the Chinese one here with me, but I think it's on my mother's in my mother's
house.
But
I saw some English.
But yeah,
I saw some English. There. What does it say?
So the title, the title is English, because they want it, and if you look inside,
which book is this?
My name is in English as well.
Okay, and what book are you holding?
This is the general science book. This is the general science book in Korean. Yeah.
Wow.
So you open up this page. I can't read any of this.
Jay, you know what I've just remembered before you go? You mentioned something about the Young Explorers books, because this is a question we also have. Now, I know you didn't write the Young Explorers books,
right? But
you mentioned something about if somebody's done some of the Young Explorers books, there can be some overlap with the junior high, being general science and physical science. I'm glad I've just remembered this before you go, and the fact that we now here at Oikos, we try and keep things as simple as possible, but now we've got these 2 channels. We've got the Science Through History with Dr. J. Wile, and we've got the Young Explorers, and people don't know which one and what am I going to miss. And so what I say is I suggest to them that they use the Science Through History, because it's the sequential, it's the parent involvement, it's incorporating all the ages of the children for the elementary years and so on. And if a child is busy showing an enormous fascination or interest in a particular topic, let's call it astronomy, because you've just touched on that, you haven't gone into the huge depth that a Young Explorers book would do, then the what you've touched on is sufficient, we know that. But this particular child might want to study astronomy at a deeper level, and then they can get the Young Explorers astronomy book, dive in there, and then carry on through your Science Through History, or do them side by side. But now you mentioned something the last time you and I chatted about one specific Young Explorers book being the human anatomy one. Yeah. You see, I was hesitating there because I don't remember its full title, but it's one of the Young Explorers, the human anatomy, and you were saying that if a child has done that thoroughly, then there might be quite a bit of overlap in the general science. So now the question comes, if I've been doing the Young Explorers books, must I still do general science? Or how does a parent know now exactly where and which books can they skip general science and hop straight to physical science if they've done science through history as well as some additional young explorers?
Well, I think if they do that Young Explorer Human Anatomy book, that is so much overlap with general science that they certainly don't have to do the second half of general science, because the second half of general science is well, the first half is nice because, like Annalise said, the first half covers a defense of the Bible, and also it does fossils and rocks, which the nothing in the Young Explorer series really touches. No. You might do the first half of general science, but honestly, if a student is not having any difficulty with the depth of the material, you could go straight from either the Young Explorer series or Science and History straight to physical science. The general science is more of a stepping stone to help you deal with the increase in depth, because whether you're doing Young Explorers
and
or
independent learning,
Science or History, the depth is much deeper for the general science than either of those elementary programs.
Okay, that is good to know. The reason I give, please tell me if it's okay or correct, and that is I use the general science stepping stone also as a transition from parental teaching to more independent.
Yeah, to more independent.
And so it's a comfortable transition rather than jumping to physical science, whereby it doesn't have that overlap, which is making it a little bit more attainable. Would that be correct?
Yes,
correct
absolutely.
Guidance? Okay.
Yeah,
good.
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate you being there, Dr. Wile. Yeah. Yes, that would be wonderful. Annalise says thank you for the books.
Maybe
bless you for all the work.
Our summer.
It might be nice if you just came here in person. That would be first prize, wouldn't it? But until then, we'll do another live stream with you if you're willing and available for that. We appreciate your time, and thank you, and blessings to you that side, and keep that pen to paper. Well, I mean your fingers on the keyboard.
Yeah,
I mean the computer keyboard, not the piano keyboard.
Okay, very good.
Well, just do both. Okay, thanks, Jay. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bless you. Bye.